Gravity should have stabilized this long ago. That is the part the models keep failing on. Structures this large are supposed to thin outward as expansion stretches matter across the universe. Density should decay. Motion should randomize. Coherence should disappear beyond a certain scale. Instead, the Hercules wall keeps accumulating galaxies along the same direction. The surveys extend farther. The boundary fills back in. A thin strand becomes a dense band. Empty regions begin glowing with faint, clustered light. Another arc appears beyond the previous limit. The map stops looking incomplete. The universe does. The map does not stop where it should. Galaxy clusters keep appearing beyond the edge of the survey, then beyond that edge too. A thin chain at first, then a denser band, then another concentration of matter so large the map stops looking physical at all. It just keeps going. The Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall stretches across roughly 10 billion light-years. Not a galaxy, not a cluster. An arrangement of matter so enormous that light itself needs a significant fraction of the age of the universe just to cross from one side to the other. And the strangest part is what it keeps doing. Structures this large are not supposed to stay coherent. Gravity should break them apart over time. Density should fade across distance. But observations keep finding new concentrations farther along the same direction, long after the structure should have thinned out. The wall thickens where it should fade. From Earth, the sky looks static, just scattered points of light. But zoom outward far enough, and entire galactic rivers appear to be moving together through space itself. Millions of galaxies flowing along invisible lanes, pulled into a structure with no visible ending. After a certain distance, the structure stops fitting inside the mind as a single object. There is no horizon anymore, no center, just accumulation. NASA sky surveys captured portions of it by tracing gamma-ray bursts across deep space. Each new detection extended the boundary again. Astronomers tried drawing the edge several times. The edge kept failing. And somewhere inside that distance, human scale disappears completely. A civilization traveling at light speed would not outlive the crossing. The arcs keep bending inward. Not colliding, not exploding, just bending toward the same direction across distances where gravity should barely matter. Entire superclusters changing direction slowly, like debris caught in the same current. The motion spreads beyond individual clusters. From inside one of those galaxies, nothing would feel wrong at first. Stars still rise, worlds still orbit. But distant markers begin sliding out of alignment. Constellations deform over millions of years. Intergalactic space stops feeling empty. Movement begins following visible paths through it. The pull spreads across hundreds of millions of light-years. Astronomers tracking large-scale motion found galaxies accelerating toward shared directions far beyond their local gravity wells. Systems separated by enormous distance begin changing direction together. The Hercules Corona Borealis Great Wall no longer looks like scattered structure. It starts resembling a corridor. It starts resembling a channel pulling matter through the same route. Hubble observations captured portions of these dense galactic regions packed along the same enormous arc. Clusters curve inward together, while surrounding voids grow darker and emptier beside them. And farther outward, the motion becomes harder to measure against anything stable. Inside a moving region this large, navigation itself begins to fail. There is no fixed backdrop anymore. Every distant marker is drifting with the flow. A spacecraft measuring itself against surrounding galaxies would watch the entire frame drift together over time, until no fixed direction remained. The motion is gradual, but it never stops. The drifting starts to look organized. Dense galaxy bands glow brighter where multiple cluster lanes converge. Long chains of clusters compress together while the surrounding dark regions widen around them, as if entire regions are being stripped thinner while the visible lanes keep thickening. For a moment, the movement feels understandable again. Gravity should explain this. The universe already contains a giant web of matter. Galaxies form along filaments. Clusters grow where gravity keeps feeding dense regions over billions of years. Simulations of the cosmic web show the same pattern on smaller scales. Matter gathers into dense regions while the empty gaps widen around them. Inside the Hercules Borealis Great Wall, that logic briefly restores orientation. You can almost trace the movement visually now. One glowing band leading into another, cluster after cluster thickening along the same route, like watching multiple currents collapse into the same channel. And for a few seconds, the scale stops feeling impossible. A navigator inside one of these regions could still believe the environment obeyed stable rules. Instruments would recalibrate. Drift patterns would make sense again. The motion has direction. The structure has shape. But the relief does not last. Because gravity should eventually stabilize structures this large. Dense regions should stop growing once matter spreads across enough distance. Instead, some sections continue thickening across billions of light years, long after the web should have evened out. The galaxy chains keep brightening anyway. And the farther outward the surveys extend, the less finished the structure appears. The surveys extend again. What looked like a fading boundary suddenly fills with more clustered light. Thin strands become dense bands. Regions that looked empty begin filling with faint, clustered light. Another arc appears beyond the previous edge, faint at first, then impossible to ignore once enough galaxies align along it. It should have stopped already. Some cosmological models reject structures this large entirely. After a certain scale, the expansion of the universe should smooth matter out. Matter should eventually smooth into near uniformity. No coherent structure should dominate across nearly 1/10 of the observable universe. But the wall keeps spreading anyway. You see the contradiction before the equations fully describe it. You watch isolated concentrations merge into continuous structure. Galaxy chains brighten where expansion should have diluted them apart. The farther outward astronomers map, the less accidental the structure begins to feel. European Space Agency sky maps captured additional large-scale clustering near portions of the same region, extending the visible complexity farther into darkness. Not enough to explain the structure, just enough to push the boundary farther outward again. Inside a structure this large, familiar scale collapses completely. A human body depends on stable reference points, horizon, distance, relative motion. But here, every scale breaks simultaneously. Entire superclusters become local features. Voids large enough to contain millions of galaxies begin feeling adjacent to each other. The system stops behaving predictably long before the physics itself breaks. And that may be the worst part. Not that gravity exists here, that it continues organizing matter coherently long after the universe should have erased the pattern. By the end of the map, the superclusters barely look like objects anymore. They flatten into thin, glowing threads inside the wall itself. Entire galactic regions shrink into texture. Dense concentrations that once seemed impossibly huge now resemble dust caught inside something larger still.
The wall,
Individual
a
galaxies stop
massive
feeling
structure
important.
of galactic corridors, is in
The observable
constant
universe spans roughly 93 billion light-years across. For humans, that distance already feels close to the edge of imaginable scale. But the Hercules Borealis Great Wall occupies so much of the cosmic map that familiar reference collapses beside it. Light can spend billions of years moving through the structure without reaching the far side. Not escaping the region, just moving through it. The motion inside the wall never fully resolves either. Clusters continue feeding into larger lanes, while dark gaps stretch between them like expanding fractures. The structure does not look settled. It still looks mid-formation. And understanding it changes nothing. A human mind can briefly follow the equations: gravity, density, expansion, but the mind still cannot hold the scale together for long. There is no meaningful horizon left to recover orientation from, no stable distance the brain can emotionally process. Local galaxies become background particles inside a structure too large to visualize as a whole. NASA deep field observations captured countless isolated galaxies across black space. Inside this wall, isolation disappears. Everything belongs to the same enormous pattern. And farther out, the fading edge still does not fully disappear.